So this is a normal video for this channel. Is another talk about how to get humanity into the intergalactic era, where we, as humans, can interact with the SAMs, the conglomerate, as I call it, of all the different types and races and individuals and groups and systems of aliens that are beyond this planet that are always in contact with us. So we've been talking, me and the Sams, for about an hour or so about how to measure one paradigm over another. So a paradigm is a system of thought, a worldview, which is basically a theory, an explanative model, a story about what is real, what is true, and what is good. And all stories do that. They all constitute what is real, what is true, and what is good, either according to the characters themselves or even according to the narrator if it's done in, what is that, third person? And so I've been trying to figure out what the reason was for them intervening in my life, because I was thinking about my life before I ever realized that the SAMs existed, and I realized that I, like most people, just accepted whatever thought appeared in my head without questioning it. I just always assumed it was my own. And you can stay in that kind of a worldview pretty much forever, and unless somebody pops that bubble, you're just going to keep going, because there's no, that's the problem with developing these paradigmatic systems, is that they end up being so rigid and so limited that once you commit to one above all the other ones, it becomes possible, if not likely, for you to never even realize that there's any other choices, and it limits everything to that. It does simplify things, and it feels better when you're acting, but when you start examining and you start trying to observe things the way that a philosopher would try to pry and tease things apart, then you start to realize that there's not much meat on the bone. There's so much that doesn't even get examined, so much that doesn't even get considered when there's only one paradigm that's being used. So I was under the assumption, and this has always been the case, but I don't know if it's true, because no one can ever figure out what the SAMs are actually here to do. It's one of the main mysteries on this planet, is what the fuck are these people doing with us? So, and there's all these different kinds of things, and they're all bad, almost. All of them are all bad. It's like, oh, humans are being farmed, and all we are is just a drug for them to get off on, or we're a product for them to sell on the open market. Kind of like movies, so if you wanted to be entertained for a few hours while you eat your dinner, then you can watch this show, kind of a thing. There's that paradigm. The story of humanity, the story of what is real, true, and good for humanity. And in that case, in that paradigm, the SAMs are evil and humanity is good, and we're all, as humans, shackled to them, and we're slaves, and we just have to do what we're told, and what's true is just whatever they say, and then we just accept it and do whatever we're supposed to do, or not, or we could reject it, but we won't find any other truth because there isn't any, because they define what's true. And there's just different ways of looking at shit. So why I think they intervened in my life is because I wanted to kill Charles. I wanted to destroy. And the reason that I was working on the book and trying to construct the Earth's first, logically valid, empirically sound paradigm because we don't have one on this planet. What we have theories, but they're always specific to specific problems. We don't, on this planet, there is no such thing as a general, what I call paradigm, where it tells you about everything that you could possibly ever experience. We still have them. We just don't know they exist. They're operating in the background without us even understanding that they're there as humans. When I say us, I mean humans. So with the aliens with the sands, that's not the case because they're more advanced than we are. So they don't have these problems of like, oh, well, I didn't realize that I was even using a paradigm. Now, granted, everybody does this thing where it's like, oh, well, I didn't realize that I had smuggled this idea in, and the reason that I find this particular thing valuable and this particular other thing not valuable is because of something else that I had smuggled in that I didn't even realize. Of course, that's going to happen. But what I'm saying is they don't have the problem of it being ubiquitous. They don't have the problem of it being literally every thought in their head goes unquestioned. They don't have the problem where literally everything that the person experiences is totally subconsciously dealt with only and never gets any conscious examination. Either because the human is so panic driven that they just don't have any more energy to bestow upon that kind of a project, or because they're too stupid, or because they're too arrogant, or because they're too obsessed with some material gain or domination over some other human or human group. So they don't really have that kind of a problem, but we do down here. So they intervened with me, I think, not because I'm, destined or fated to have been awoken or something like that, because I was afraid of that for a long time, and I had paranoid schizophrenic delusions for a long time about that, but I don't think that's the case. I hope it's not the case. I think the reason that they intervened was because I wanted to destroy all these other systems, especially Charles's system, because Charles keeps us in chains down here. He makes sure people don't ever examine their thoughts. He actively puts effort into making sure that people don't think, that they just automatically come up with some conclusion in their head and they walk away. They don't even have any choice, any chance of understanding what the fuck is actually going on. And he wants them like that. And, I have a lot of that in me. I understand that about Charles. Me and Charles are a lot alike in that respect. I have such disdain for the average human because the reason that I keep all these videos up here, even though they're damaging to my reputation, is because they're damaging to my reputation to those types of people who can't or won't think critically about issues. Where if you say the wrong word at the wrong time, they'll just freak out and they won't even begin to have an investigation. They'll be the type of person that says, I don't need to know anything else. I already know X. First of all, they don't know anything. No one does. Socrates said that. Aristotle said that. The only thing that I know is that I know nothing. And that's true. If you're a real, true philosopher, if you really, truly, critically analyze anything long enough, you will unravel it and there will be nothing at its foundation. You will be confronted with nothing. You will be confronted with a complete void of understanding. And you'll realize that you've just simply asserted something. Somewhere along the line, you smuggled something in and believed that it was true when you had no empirical evidence to back it up and you had no rationale because there's nothing before it to justify it. It's too fundamental. It's like, well, how do you know that numbers are real? Well, we just assume that they are. We just axiomatically assume that they are. We don't justify it because there's no way to justify it. It's the limit of relativity itself. Mathematics is describing the limit of relativity itself. It's a straight line, man. On one side, there's subjectivity, the axioms by which we construct all these things. And on the other side of math, at the more complex end, is all the relations between these axioms, being examined. And the way that you know that is you look at Euclid's axioms, for example, and Take Euclid's, what is it, 7 postulates? It's like a handful of these axiomatic postulates. And if you use them, you end up with an entire realm of geometry. And you can do the same thing with numbers. If you axiomatically assume that there is such a value as 0, that it's the closest to nothing that you can get, and that all proximities away from 0 go toward infinity, toward the periphery. And infinity is another axiomatic assumption. That we don't know that there is such a thing as infinity. It just happens to be very useful when we're trying to ascertain the ratio of influence between two bodies. So relativity is why we have these limits as far as like what is explained in mathematics and yet what is left unexplained. The axioms that we choose, the postulates, for example, why are Euclid's postulates those particular postulates? Why aren't they some other postulates? And what happens if you have other postulates is that you get extra Euclidean geometry. You get Riemann geometry and other things. Excuse me, not extra Euclidean, non-Euclidean geometry. And you can do the same thing with numbers, and you can do the same thing with anything in math. You can use different base systems to use different values, so you can get different fractional values in arithmetic. You can use complex numbers, imaginary numbers. You can use all kinds of different things, and you end up with all these different types of systems, and which of those systems are true and which of them are false depends on what they're being applied to. So if you apply something in math, let's say, I don't know, a non-Euclidean geometric idea or map to a Euclidean geometrical space, then you'll see some contradictions there and it won't make sense because the postulates that you've assumed don't match the postulates that are in the thing that you're trying to apply it to. So there's a contradiction, and so then it's not the right one to use. So I don't think that there is a quote-unquote right geometry or a right math. I think that it's a tool to job matching problem, where it's not that the hammer is the right tool to use, period. It's that the hammer is the right tool to use if you're hammering nails. But a screwdriver is the right tool to use if you're screwing in screws. So it just depends on if you're using nails or screws, not hammers or screwdrivers. The question of whether or not you should use a hammer or a screwdriver is dependent upon whether or not you're applying it to nails or screws. So you take that into account, and I wanted to destroy Charles, right? That was my goal. And so every single act of destruction requires a tool in order to commit this act of destruction. Just like a hammer can be used to build a house, it can also be used to bash someone's fucking skull in. Well, I created a weapon initially that had the purpose of destroying Charles, or at the very least destroying what I considered to be evil. And this is very, very common. I would venture to say it's basically ubiquitous on Earth that people think that you should destroy evil. Well, why shouldn't you destroy it? If you allow it to exist, it can destroy you, and that's bad, and so you're bad if you don't destroy bad things. And that's bullshit, because every time you destroy something, you waste something. Consider this. One of the first things that I came across when I was starting to try to kill Charles is, well, you know, it's a hell of a lot more useful to convert my enemy than it is to kill them. Because if I kill my enemy loses one guy, but I don't gain shit. But if I convert my enemy loses one guy, and I gain one guy simultaneously. So you do that compounding, at the end of this, very, very quickly, you see an exponential rise in converting your enemy rather than killing them, because it's just so much more lucrative. If I successfully convert one of those enemies, I can teach that previously an enemy person, now a converted ally. I can teach that converted ally to convert other enemy combatants. And that's the compounding nature of it. It's like, it's way more useful to convert than it is to kill. It's way more useful to persuade than it is to threaten. Because when you threaten, you're constraining everything to a singularity, which may not even be good for you, let alone them. So it's something that most dictators don't realize through their arrogance. And I didn't either. And I still don't, and I still won't. And I will never get to a point where I actually get past this completely. But to the degree to which I recognize it, then I can avoid those particular specific pitfalls. But, I'm sorry, in accordance with whatever specific thing that I've recognized that I've been arrogant about, I can avoid that pitfall. And to the degree to which I recognize it, that's the distance before I have to travel before I avoid the pitfall. Hopefully avoiding it completely, but, without deviating course. And having to go take a U-turn or go back, to redirect myself, wasting less time and energy before I realize that I've made the wrong choice. So they intervened because if there is any system that exists whose sole subjective goal is to destroy another system, then the domestic system, the one that wants to survive long enough to be able to destroy the other system, won't be able to survive itself, because it doesn't have anything that affirms itself. It only has things that contradict the other. So let's take, for example, Stalin's dictatorship. What ripped it apart from the inside out was that it did not ever stand for anything. It stood against capitalism. It stood against the bourgeoisie. It stood against Nazism. It stood against capitalism. It stood against freedom of speech. It stood against private property ownership. It stood against the freedom of the market and free market exchange. And it stands against all these things, but it doesn't stand for anything. And that's why no one was able to predict whose head was on the chopping block next, because it never stood for anything. So that makes everybody its enemy, because it doesn't have any room to protect anyone. It only destroys. And that's why he died the way that he did. And that's why his movement failed in the way that it did. And that's why the only thing that Stalin will ever be known for is evil and death and failure and stupidity and ignorance and barbarism. Whereas me, not me, I get to be the special one that never has that said about me. But I'm just saying, it goes, it is what it is. The reason that Stalin failed is because he didn't stand for anything. He only stood against things. And I see the same problem happening in Antifa that I saw in that I see in Stalin's regime and Hitler's regime. And Hitler's regime was the same, at least as far as the problems that it had with hating rather than helping. It's easy to hate. It's easy to say, you're wrong, and you suck, and this sucks, and that sucks, and everything sucks. It's easy to say that. It's difficult to say, This is awesome in the face of somebody else saying that it sucks. And that's what I'm saying, is like, the systems that survive are the ones that don't try to destroy other systems. Or at the very fucking least, they're at least capable of protecting themselves and sustaining and affirming themselves. And saying, you know, we stand for X, Y, and Z. As long as it stands for something, then it's possible that it can survive. But if it stands only ever against things and doesn't stand for anything, what are you gonna, you know, what else could you possibly expect to happen? Other than it just dies off because it doesn't even care about sustaining itself. It just wants to kill. And so I call that the butcher's knife or the axe, because it's the exact opposite of a scalpel. A scalpel is very delicate, and you know it has a medical benefit to it. Whereas an axe, you can't really use an axe to do surgery. It's just too brutal. It's too barbaric. It's too simplistic. And that's how almost all new inventions start off, is they typically start off as a weapon. You know, we got the atom bomb and then we got nuclear power. Because it's a hell of a lot easier to let a reaction go totally unheated, you know, unhindered, unleashed, and allow it to destroy things. It's a hell of a lot easier to destroy than it is to create. All it takes to destroy something is a fist and rage. All it takes to create something is time and energy and caring and preparation and critical thought and adaptation and cooperation and and money and time and energy, and you know it's a hell of a lot more difficult to build a house than it is to break it down. I mean, think about this. All you have to do to destroy a house is you just take a fucking sledgehammer and you just bash it into fucking pieces. I could destroy the place that I live in right now, this stupid little apartment complex that I pay $920 a month for. This place that half the fucking time, half the time, my toilet won't stop flushing. They finally fixed that. The faucet won't stop leaking. They haven't fixed that yet. The blinds on the fucking window are completely goddamn breaking off because they're like 10 years old and they're plastic and they've been warped and disintegrated by the sun, and they'll just fall apart in your hands. Why is that the case? Well, because it's a hell of a lot easier to destroy things than it is to create them. When you create things, then you're constantly battling against entropy. And as everybody knows, entropy always increases. It never decreases totally in a totally closed system, which nothing is. There is no such thing as a totally closed system. Reality itself is open. But that's a topic for another day. They intervened because any system whose sole directive is destruction what else can it do other than be, you know, if I were to take that system and apply it to itself, it would destroy itself. It wouldn't affirm itself. It wouldn't be good for itself. It can't be good for anything. And so then it just dies off. Now, if you get really deep into it and you really start to examine all the different ways that everything could possibly ever be used to destroy something else, then you realize Every system has destructive elements to it, but no system, except the system of nothing, is completely and utterly and totally defined by destruction alone. If you attempt to create a system whose sole directive is destruction, it will end up in nothing. Not only for your enemy, yeah, you might succeed in that, but then also for you. And that's what happens with all these violent wars and threats of war and coups and violent overthrows of governments and things like that. They always end up in nothing. Now, all the SAMs did was just accelerate that process so that it all occurred inside me, the same individual that came up with the system. I ended up destroying or bringing myself to the brink of destruction. I almost died. I don't know how many fucking times. At least 3 times I almost died. So I saw nothing face to face. And it's just like, no, you don't want to fucking deal with that shit. Now, I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit. No one ever sees nothing because it's indiscernible. But I'm just saying, I was faced with my own destruction. I was faced with my own mortality. I almost died 3 times overdosing on fentanyl. Now, you could be like, well, that's because you're a drug addict. And I hope that's what stupid, ignorant people do, just like Charles. I hope that's what you think, because if it is, you will die. And you will be enslaved, and you will be infuriated, just like you are right now, just like you've always been your whole life. And how did I know that? Because you're a fucking idiot. And that's why you go after me. Same way I went after Charles. And what happened to me will happen to you. And you'll either die or you will survive like I did. And you'll eventually get past that and you'll realize, hey, wait a minute. It doesn't really make any sense to throw rocks at someone before I even know their first fucking name. Especially if people have thrown rocks at me and they fucking hurt, and they didn't have any right to do that to me, so why would I do that to someone else? So then you start building systems that don't destroy things as much. No one's ever been able to figure out a system that doesn't destroy anything at all, because again, that leads to nothing too, because there is no such system that's so delicate and so soft that it allows all other systems to remain the way that they are without dying itself. You can either be the devil, or you can be the Antichrist, or you can be Jesus, but you're going to die. You're just a martyr. You're not making it anywhere. Whether you want to destroy nothing, or you want to destroy everything, or you want to destroy some specific thing, to the degree to which, and given whichever specificity, that destruction that you rent upon whatever else you rent it upon, it will be rent upon you. Eventually, everything comes back to itself. It's directed by itself, it affirms itself, or it destroys itself. And its self-relation is the relation that defines all its other relations. If it hates itself, then it hates all the rest of them. If it hates all the rest of them, then it probably hates itself too. It's just one of those things. So the trick that I've learned is pretty simple. If I try not to destroy anything, if I try not to destroy it, if I give it a chance to leave or go somewhere else or adapt, and I call it a Sun Tzu. If you give it a Sun Tzu, then at least you gave it the opportunity to survive your own presence. All right, well, good. So a Sun Tzu is you have to give, it's part of the art of war, as he called it, is you have to give your enemy at least, if you only give your enemy one mode of escape, they'll take it. The obvious implication being that if you try to make it so that the only way that your enemy can escape you is to kill you, they will, because you've put them in a position where that's the only thing they can do. But if you give them an out, if you let them escape, they won't kill you. They'll just run off. and you'll survive the war as well as the battle. But if you never give your enemy a way out, then the only way out is to kill you, and then they'll kill you. And that's what I did to Charles, and so that's what the Sams did to me, and so then that's how I ended up being a complete fucking fruitcake and losing my goddamn mind. You know, with all the craziness that I have expressed in some of my videos on this channel. You'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see psychotic delusion being displayed and expressed, and that is the remnants that I'm still trying to mop up from me trying to kill Charles and the Sams intervening, and that conflict shattering my soul and destroying my paradigm, because it destroyed itself. And like I said, the Sams, they try to accelerate the evolutionary process. If they do their job right, whatever happens to us as a result of their influence would have happened anyway, but more slowly. So their influence upon us is to accelerate evolution. They act, hopefully, the intent is that they act as a vicar of God, judging us and trying to get us into our proper places. They have expressed to me deep concerns, which I understand now. I'm beginning to understand. Or as I usually put it, I can... well, anyway, I can't remember it. But the point of it is that they have deep concerns about this because it puts them in a position of responsibility spiritually. Not just people's lives, but their souls beyond the grave are in the Sam's hands, especially those of us like humans, like us here, that don't get it yet, that don't understand these things, that don't understand the way that the Sams have been interacting with us and are easily swayed and are stupid enough to say, yeah, whatever, you just want to rape the little baby buttholes. Yeah, I just did. I just fucking did. And then, you know, we can go back and forth on that all day long, and I love doing that, but it doesn't actually, the result of it is that we both end up with nothing. You know, the end result of that, if I were one guy and you were one guy saying, all you want to do is just rape all the little kids, all you want to do is just kill everybody, oh, you're evil and stupid and crazy. And then I say the same thing right back to you. And you're sitting there like, well, that's just stupid and evil and crazy. How could that ever possibly, be applied to me? Well, because you're supporting Charles. If you attack me, then you're opening the door for Charles, because Charles is my enemy, and Charles is the one that actually rapes all the kids. I've never raped a kid. But you can accuse me of it because your fifis get hurt because I said words that made you feel bad, which in your stupid little head makes you feel like I raped little kids. That's the same thing that Caleb and Ethan and Casper and those two guys that showed up at my fucking door that one night all did. And, admittedly, it's also what the Sams did. Now, the reason that they thought that was completely different than the humans. The humans all had the same reason. I said a word, pizza. Oh, he said pizza? Okay, well then he just wants to rape kids. And that's all it takes to the human, because humans are fucking retarded. But the reason that the Sams thought that I was going to go out and hurt kids and kill kids and stuff was because of my interest in Catherine. And Catherine did these things, and I was attracted to Catherine. So therefore, I must want to do these things. So that at least makes some sense. I can actually make sense out of that. I can make that into a worldview, a paradigm that doesn't just fall to pieces under its own fucking weight, that doesn't invalidate itself, that's not completely fucking retarded. And to give you an idea to contrast against that, something that doesn't make sense would be, well, some guy said pizza one time, so therefore he wants to rape everybody. You know, that's just stupid. That doesn't make any sense. Everybody, in order to accuse the person of having said it, you have to say it. So that doesn't make any sense. It's self-contradictory. If all it took was to say the word pizza to get somebody to think that you wanted to rape all the little baby butts, how do you ever accuse them of saying it without saying it yourself? Well, you said the word pizza. Well, you said the word pizza too. So now you must want to rape all the little baby buttholes. It's so simplistic that it just falls to pieces under its own weight. So at least the Sams had a real reason. I was attracted to Catherine, still am, and I knew that she was out killing the little kids. Why? Well, because that's, you know, it's in the code, but mostly it's because of the research that I had done into the Illuminati and realizing that she was way the fuck up there, and seeing pictures of her at these various parties and things, and then guilt by association. So, you know, I don't know if she did or not, but I believed that, and they know that I believed that. So if anybody knows anything, they knew that I had desire for her. Even though, perhaps not despite, but perhaps even because of the fact that she does these things, where she kills kids, stuff like that. Stuff like that. You know, just stuff like that. So that was why they had those ideas about me, and because of my infatuation with her, and because me and the Sams hadn't really talked about it very much, because I didn't really know they existed, they were left in a position of assuming that that's what I wanted. Now, over time, it became apparent to them that that's not actually what I wanted. What I wanted was for her to get better and for me to get better, because that's clearly what she wants. She says that over and over and over. And, you know, so that's the same thing that I also say, and that's the same thing that I also stand for. I also have temptations to do things that I know are wrong, but the fact that I know that they're wrong matters. It's not that, well, you did it, you know, you did this thing, or you said this thing, or you wanted to do this thing, but you would have if you had the chance. And that's how they took it, and that's how I take it. If somebody had the chance to do something and they just didn't because they couldn't do it, well, their heart is obviously in one place, but their body was restrained, or they didn't have enough money, they couldn't pull it off, but that's what they wanted to do. Well, then that's who they are. I don't care what they can and can't do. I'm not an objectivist in that way. I'm not like Ayn Rand, where I say that the objective physical manifestation of things is the ultimate totality of all judgment. I don't believe that, not for a second. In fact, I'm the exact opposite. I'm an idealist, not an objectivist. I stand on the exact opposite stance as Ayn Rand. I think the physical world is a fucking accident. It's a shadow. It's a comedy of errors. The fact that I don't have money right now in order to get away with murder doesn't make me not a murderer. It just makes me not capable of committing murder because I couldn't get away with it here. That doesn't mean that I'm not exempt. That doesn't make me exempt from the accusation of murderer simply because I didn't physically commit the act. It matters about what my intent is. It matters what I would do given the chance to do it. And at the time that the Sams were judging me, I believed that I would have. I would have killed kids if I were given the chance. And if I knew that I could get away with it. Just out of curiosity. They do it. Why are they doing it? I want to know why they're doing it. They obviously have some reason to do it. Why are they doing it? It's the same reason that I started smoking cigarettes. Same reason that I started doing drugs. Well, other people are doing it, and they seem to like it, and they seem to have some value in it. Why do they do this? I want to know what that value is. What are they experiencing that I haven't yet experienced? I'd like to experience something I've never experienced, especially if it's rare like that, where it's like not everybody gets the chance, not everybody's done it, because there's people out there that have never done drugs. There's people out there that have never looked at the porn that I've looked at, or done the drugs that I've done, or thought the thoughts that I've thunk, or said the things that I've said, etc. And thankfully, at least thoughts are free. So I had my thoughts about Catherine. And if she did it, well, then I might join in. But if she didn't do it, if somebody else didn't do it, if there was nobody else doing it, well, then no, I probably wouldn't. But again, given the chance, would I fall into temptation? Yeah. Yeah, I would. And I know that now. I didn't at the time because I was arrogant and I thought that I was, above that. And that I, just like most of you listening to this, if there is anyone listening to this, oh, I would never do that. Yeah, you would. If you were given a particular lifestyle where that happened to you, where you saw that happen when you were a little baby butthole yourself, if you grew up in an environment where little kids were getting raped and or killed on a daily basis right in front of you and no one was doing anything about it, you don't think that's going to fuck with your head? Of course it would. That's why it's wrong to do it. You don't raise a kid in that kind of an environment because it fucks with their head. If it didn't fuck with their head and they would just be fine anyway, well, then it would be fine to do it. The reason that we don't do that is because it has that kind of an impact on someone to make them want to do it themselves. The reason that we don't molest kids is because the kids that get molested end up molesting other kids when they grow up. And we all know that. Subconsciously, we all know that. But everybody simultaneously has this Orwellian doublethink where they go, yeah, well, everybody else in the entirety of existence except me would do that. But me and me alone would never do that, even if I got put into this situation. Yeah, you would. You're just like everybody else. And if anybody else got put into that situation, that's what they fucking do. That's how we know about this shit that I just fucking said. And that's the end result of that. Is like, if you think you're just so fucking special, that you're the only single person in existence that would never do these things, then you're a fucking idiot and you're going to end up with somebody's dick in your ass one day, figuratively or physically. You're going to end up with a dick in your ass. If you think that your ass can't be fucked, you'll fuck it yourself. You will fuck your own ass one day. Mark my words. So I was one of those people, and I was like, oh, well, she's such a bitch. She's such an evil little bitch. And it's kind of like that. I had the same kind of a look toward her in regards to her doing those things. As I felt the same way about that as somebody that looks at, like, if you were in high school and you had like a bitchy cheerleader and she's hot as fuck and she knows it and she just gets away with everything and she could just do whatever she wants and she's just like, yeah, fuck you. And you're like, you're pissed at her and you hate her guts, but for some reason it turns you on. You're like, God damn it. And that's the same kind of a thing that it was at the first beginning inception of this all that happened to me. Slowly, over 8 years, it became enriched with my own psychological delusions and things like that. And it grew and grew and grew. And it became and developed into this crazy saga. At the end of which, I flipped sides and I was like, you know what? The issue that I had with people raping kids has to deal with when I got molested when I was a kid. And I could not see any value in that, obviously. And so then I could not see any value in someone who would do that, obviously. And so then I could not see any value in other people who did that to other people. So it just made sense to me. It was very simple that I didn't like getting molested, so they must not like getting molested. So the same type of shit that fucked with me, the same type of crap that happened to me that I had to go through as a kid, is now being inflicted upon all these kids over here. It's not just affecting me. This is a worldwide fucking problem. And the worst part of it is that it's not decentralized where it's just a bunch of random people doing a bunch of random stuff and it just happens to be the case that kids get molested. It's the fact that there's a group of people that systematically ensure that kids get raped all the fucking time because they'll kill off people like Epstein if they ever get caught. They make sure that they never get caught. And that's why you have these places like Lolita Island and shit like that. And that's why you have these parties that they go to where they rape and kill kids in some of them. And some of them, they don't kill the kids. And some of them, they just have sex with them. And for all intents and purposes, it's actually consensual on both ends. And in some cases, it's the full spectrum. It's, there's kids that will lie about their age and say that they're 21 when they're 16. That happens all over the fucking place. There was a naval officer that got in trouble where I was at in Pensacola, Florida. I don't know if he got caught in Pensacola, but I heard about it when I was stationed there. And there was this naval officer that ended up getting busted because he fucked some 16-year-old girl who flashed her older sister's ID card at the bar. So she goes to the bar. She's 16 years old. She steals her, or I don't know if her older sister gave it to her or whatever, but she has her older sister's ID on her when she goes to the bar. She's 16 years old. She sneaks out of her house with her older sister's ID card. She goes to the bar and she says, yeah, I'm 21. And what are they going to do? They look at the ID. Okay, you look like the picture because it's her sister. And it says that you're 21, so here's your alcohol. Here you go. Some naval officer happened to be at the bar. He sees her there. Bartender serves her, so she's obviously older looking. She doesn't look like she's a little toddler, or a teenager, so he gives her alcohol. The naval officer buys it too and says, oh, okay, well then she must be old enough to bang, doesn't think anything about it. Takes her to his room and bangs her, and then her dad finds out, and the naval officer is getting accused of statutory rape, and it's like, how the fuck is that even his fault? He met her at a bar. It wasn't at a party. It wasn't on the street. It wasn't in some public area that any kid could get into. This was a bar. You can't get into a bar unless you have an ID that says that you're 21. Is the bartender going to get in trouble for that? How the hell was he supposed to know? All he knows is he can check the picture against the face. That's as best he can do, or she. What is the bartender supposed to do? What is everybody supposed to do? Are we supposed to ID check each other and do background checks and wait for 4 to 6 weeks? Hire private investigators to make sure that every single person says that they're 21 is actually 20 or 18 or whatever the age restriction is for the action that you're about to commit with them? How are you going to know? And so he ends up getting busted, and I always thought that was bullshit. It's like, that chick should have gotten busted. It's her fault. She's the reason that all this shit happened, not him. But you can't say that because she's a chick and he's a dude and he's older than she is, and so therefore it's always his fault. Every fucking time. And if you say anything about it on the other end of it, well, then you must clearly be advocating for raping children to death with your dick, and I'm going to kill you now, etc. So it's like I had said, if you think like that, if you're in that kind of a mentality, you're just going to end up destroying yourself. Milo Yiannopoulos got in trouble for the same kind of thing, where he advocates for the limit to be set lower than it is. Where it's like, why is it 18? Why isn't it 16 or 17 or 17 and a half? What is this magical transformation that happens on your birthday of your 18th year that suddenly transforms you, where 1 minute before midnight on your 18th birthday, 1 minute before, at 11:59 p.m., the day before your birthday, your 18th birthday, you're still a child, but the instant that it hits midnight, on your 18th birthday, the instant that happens, you magically transform into the perfectly mature adult, is a stupid idea, and everyone knows it. Everyone knows that there is no fucking way that you could ever rationalize that idea that at 11:59 p.m., the day before your 18th birthday, that you're a child, and 1 minute later at midnight, you magically transform into an adult. And the version of you at 11:59 is not exactly the same version of you for all intents and purposes as the one that is at midnight. They're not two different people. You don't magically get imbued with all of the maturity of an adult in the span of a single moment in between 11:59 and midnight on your 18th birthday. It just doesn't fucking make sense. And yet, if you say that, well, the only reason that you could ever possibly say such things is because you want to rape little baby buttholes, and so we're going to kill you, and you're an evil child molester, and ha 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 ha. And also rage and sickness, and oh, I'm so disgusted, and I'm gonna throw up. And all this stupid crap that I've heard and had expressed to me in so many different words. So I'm of the opinion that no, you don't get to use the age of 18 as your limit of separating adults from children. There are 40-year-old virgins eating pizza bites in their mom's basement that have less maturity than a 10-year-old raising his 5 brothers and sisters who would otherwise be on the street because mom's a crack addict and dad's in jail. The maturity level between those two individuals is vast and measurable. And I don't think that you can measure it simply by using this stupid, barbaric rubric as your physical age. I don't think that has anything to do with your maturity level. And nor does anyone with a rationally thinking mind. The only time that people develop the mask that says that that's somehow accurate are the people that have been kowtowed into submission by society that says that you're not allowed to say anything against the age of 18 limitation. And if you suggest that it gets moved anywhere lower than 18, then you're obviously trying to rape children to death with your dick and deserve to burn in hell for eternity. If you even so much as question that measure, then you get booted off. And I'm not just saying that, I've seen it. Milo Yiannopoulos got just absolutely booted from society because he had the audacity to make the claim that a 16-year-old could want sex from someone who was over 18. Wow, you don't fucking say. Everybody knows that that's the case. That's why there's laws that are supposed to protect kids from having sex with adults, is because the kids want to have sex with adults. And if you don't believe me, I already fucking showed you. It happens every day. There's girls that steal their older sister's ID and go to the bar and have drinks and get laid all the time. It happens all the time. And if you don't think that it ever happened anywhere ever, and you're one of those people that are just like, I don't want to listen to your words, and so I'm just going to bury my head in the sand and pretend that all you want to do is rape all the baby butts, then you're going to end up having the same kind of psychotic crap that happened to me. If you even get that far. Most of the time, people don't ever go to the extremes that I did because they are not philosophers. They don't think about it anyway. So when they get confronted by something like this, they just automatically tuck tail, turn and run. And bark on their way out like a fucking chihuahua at a St. Bernard. Roar, 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 roar. And the fucking St. Bernard's just staring at them, just, yeah, whatever. They have to do that because it's so scary that they can't deal with it. And they have to just attack instantly, even though they know they're going to lose. They have to do that. So I do it too. We all do, and every time that we do it, we're the Chihuahua, and the other one is the Saint Bernard, unless they're both Chihuahuas, which happens. Cat fight. So it's kind of like that. But the reason that they intervened with me is because of that kind of thing, where I was like, well, you're stupid and you're crazy and you're evil because you didn't agree with me. So there must be something wrong with you because you didn't agree with me and my own particular bent way of looking at reality. And so you must be wrong, and there must be something wrong with you because there's a conflict between me and you, and so you're at fault. Automatically. And I still do it, and I'll always do it. I'm always gonna do it. I'm a human, that's what I do. And even the Sams do it as individuals. But luckily they have this thing called the scalpel. Well, I call it the scalpel anyway. You can call it whatever you want, but I call it the scalpel. And it's not an axe, it's a scalpel. And what they do is they take whatever system that you have and they reflect it back to you, because that way they can't be held at fault. Now, the first thing you should think of is, how do they know what system I have? How do they measure that? How do I know that their idea of my system is actually my system? How do I know that they're accurate? Well, unfortunately, they're not. And this is why they have these qualms about doing their job. Is like every job, it has its errors, it has its risks, it has its problems. And so the problem with this job of reflecting back someone else's ideas to themselves is, how do you know that those are actually their ideas? And then you could say, well, I'll just read their thoughts. You think things are so simple. Not everything that you think is expressed in words. Some of the things that you think have no words. They're wordless. They're just states of existence. Or they're implications, but they're not said explicitly. They're just implied. So how do you read an implication? Well, that's an art. So what they'll do is, if you engage with something, it must have some value. If you don't engage with something, it must not have value, because whether its value is positive or negative will garner a response. You'll either be for it, positive, or you'll be against it, negative. But you'll stand somewhere near it. If you just leave the situation, if you don't respond, if you're silent, if you don't engage with it, then it must just not have any value. You don't consider it a threat, because otherwise you'd attack it. You don't consider it a benefit, because otherwise you'd take it, or you'd protect it from other people stealing it, or you'd nurture it and make sure that it stays there. Something like that. But if you just leave, if you just don't engage it at all, then it must not have any value to you. So then they don't put it in there as often. And to the degree to which you don't engage with something is the degree to which it doesn't get reflected back to you. So, like I had said, and this is a valid argument, Mike, okay, it is a valid argument, is the problem that is inherent to this interaction between us and the Sams is that it is inherently reactive, and it necessitates the existence of echo chambers, where I can never become aware of any system beyond my own system, because the only system that's being shown to me is my own system, reflected back to me. Granted, that's a very clever political thing, but I will grant that to you. That is true, Sans. The error in their reflection, where they reflect an idea back to me that I don't actually have. That error, which naturally occurs, has to, because I change all the time. I am a fluid, amorphous blob. I don't have discrete actual limits like the reflection says that I do, because I'm not a mathematical object in the way that the scalpel is rendering me as such. And it has to, because it's the only fair way of treating everyone equally is to treat everyone as if they were a mathematical object in a giant algorithmic processing unit. Just like a computer processes information, doesn't care what the user is who created it, it's processing that information the same, irregardless. Doesn't matter if Bethesda made this video game or if it was some other company, doesn't care. Computer doesn't care. It's going to run the same, it doesn't matter at all. It doesn't even factor into it. It isn't even aware of who created what. It only matters what the coding is, and that's it. So if the coding in the video game is rendered as such, the computer will run as such. And that's how you get the video game to run on everyone's computer systems. But there are going to be computer systems where it just will not fucking run. It won't run, not necessarily because there's anything wrong with the graphics card, although that oftentimes is the case. The graphics card needs to get updated. It's just not strong enough to be able to produce the display necessary to render the video game in real time. There's just too much information for it to process that quickly, so it can't do it. But in other cases, it happens simply because there's some conflict between the operating system and the video game. There's a conflict between the other programs that have already been installed in the computer, somehow having some kind of a problem with the video game. There's not enough memory in the hard drive to save any data. There could be all kinds of problems. Somebody has a virus on their computer, and so then it won't run the video game because there's a virus. There's all kinds of things that can happen that will make the video game unable to be rendered properly. Now, given all of those errors, the fact that those errors exist, then display that to me so that I can become aware of it. And given those errors, I can then determine, aha, this isn't God, this isn't me, this isn't the devil, this isn't somebody else, this is the Sam's scalpel reflecting this shit back to me. And I can actually identify it, ironically, because of the errors that it has. And it has these errors because I'm not a computer. I'm not a video game. And so when they make these analogies, they don't always line up exactly, because if it lined up exactly, it wouldn't be an analogy. It would just be that way. There would not be room enough for an analogy because it would actually be it. Like, if I was going to give an example of something, I wouldn't be able to give an example because the example would actually be it. And so then you just have to do it in order to understand it. Because by the time I give you an example, it already has manifested, kind of a thing. So the reason that the Sams intervened with me is because I had tried to weaponize. I can't call it a scalpel because it wasn't used for medical purposes. It basically turned what could have been a scalpel into a hammer or an axe. And the reason that it was so abhorrent is because it was so powerful. The idea of building an absolutely consistent paradigm is very powerful. If I were to weaponize that, I could kill all humans. I have it within my power to do. If I wanted to, I could create a paradigm like I was originally going to do, which is absolutely consistent, perfectly deductively logical, where you cannot argue against it inside of itself. It has no errors. It is perfectly crystalline. But the problem, again, just like with the scalpel that the Sams use, is that when you apply that perfect system to this imperfect real world, you'll find errors because it will not match, because this world is not perfect. This world does not operate according to absolutely perfect, pristine, logical laws. There are illogical, irrational, random things that happen for chaotic reasons that we don't understand. There's things that are really, really, really complex that, yes, they are logically valid when you finally get all the pieces to settle, but holy fuck shit Jesus, you look at that system and you tell me you can make any goddamn sense out of it. You can't. And that happens. There are things that happen like dark matter and dark energy. Physicists are aware of it, but yet it's so complex and so crazy that there's no way for them to be able to make sense of it yet. They can't grasp it fully. It's like they can touch it, they can point at it, but they can't grab it because it's too big. It's just too big of a fucking thing. It's too complex. And so we're bereft. All we can do is just hope that one day we'll understand it, but we can't do anything until then about it. The reason that the Sams intervened with me is because I had a system that was unsustainable, that was going to kill everybody. And the reason that it was going to kill everybody is because it alone would be the first theory on this planet that has an unlimited scope, but yet has no errors. And that's never been done on this planet. Even with Bertrand Russell and Whitehead's paper on the Principia Mathematica, I think it was, where they tried to show that mathematics itself can be derived from pure logic, which I think they did an okay job at. The only problem with theirs is that they asserted everything they said. There was no derivation involved. I mean, most, if not all, of the stuff that they say in the book either contradicted itself or it wasn't capable of being derived from previous fundamental ideas. So it didn't actually form into a system. It was a diffuse blob of what do they call that? It's like a random scattering of rocks or bones on the ground. It's not a picture. It's just that they accidentally happened to fall into place. But there was no design and no effort behind it, no intent, no spirit, no real oomph behind it. It was like an engine that had no fuel. It showed promise that one day it might run, but it couldn't run on its own. Because every single fucking thing in that Principia Mathematica, every goddamn thing in there is just asserted. And this was asserted, and that was asserted, and everything was asserted, and yet there's no justification for anything, and it doesn't have a system. It has a whole bunch of diffuse, independent, randomly attributed positions. But none of those positions are interconnected, so there's not really a way for you to build an entire system out of it like they had intended to do. They just ended up asserting almost everything in it. And as I've said before, and I'll say it again, it is disgusting and it is abhorrent and barbaric, but at least it was a step in the right direction. At least they tried. At least they put effort into doing something that I think was on the right track. It just didn't actually make it to the station. The train left, it's on the track, but it didn't make it to the station. They did not succeed in what they originally intended to do. And I can understand why. It's a gargantuan fucking task. But now that they have at least created a trailhead, now if we walk on that trailhead enough, we'll eventually walk that path into a real trail. And then we can pave it, and we can turn it into a road, and we can drive on it super fast, and it'll be very seamless. And it'll be a system that they originally intended on it being. Now, if that system came from nothing and then projected that nothing is where everything would eventually end up, it becomes nihilistic, which would destroy everyone. And that's what I had originally created. And you can do it. It is actually possible to logically render everything as nothing. Because what you do is, you start with nothing, and then you create everything out of nothing. And then you say that ultimately it's surrounded by nothing, and its central axioms are nothing, and it depends upon nothing. And so therefore, for all intents and purposes, it basically is nothing. Because how do we determine what one physical body is as separated from another physical body? We determine dependency. What makes one physical body separate from another physical body is its independence from it. If you have two physical objects which are independent from each other, that means if one of them moves, the other one doesn't necessarily move. If you have one physical body, then every part in there is connected to every other part, such that if one of them moves, all of them move. And that's how you determine whether or not something is a physical object, or if it's just, It's how you determine if it's two or more. Multiple physical objects versus singular physical object. Is it part of the same object or is it part of something else? Is determined about the relations between the parts. If all the parts move, then it's one system. If at least one part doesn't move, then it's not one system anymore. And you could be like, whoa, wait a minute. I can move my hand without moving my foot, so therefore my hand is not part of my body and my foot is not part of my body. That's not true. If you move your hand and your foot doesn't move, that doesn't mean that you're not part of one physical object. It just means that your hand moves, so your arm moves. So your arm, I guess the whole thing is moving because of your circulatory system. If I were to chop off my hand, it wouldn't be able to move at all, and it would just sit there. Its ability to move depends upon the same system that allows my foot to move. So it's not just the integration of parts that makes one object separate from another, but it's one way of measuring it. If you were to take an instance in which all the parts necessarily always move every time, dependent upon some other part, and all the parts share that, in that state, you can say, yes, that's one physical object. But by the time that you get to hands versus feet moving, stuff like that happening, where if one part moves, it doesn't necessitate that another part moves, but yet it's still part of the same physical object, then you have to use a different measure. I haven't come across that yet, but I will eventually have to deal with that too. But if a person develops a system where the only thing that defines it is that whenever it interacts with anything, it kills it, it will be killed. It will kill itself, or something else will kill it. So if you develop a system where the goal is to destroy, not to create, and it doesn't stand for anything, it only stands against things, that system will fail. To give you an example, Antifa stands against things, but it doesn't stand for anything. It will say that it stands for the civil rights of all people. But if that were the case, then it wouldn't attack people. It wouldn't censor people because freedom of speech is a right. They just don't agree that that's a right. So they're against freedom of speech. They're not for anything. They're against things. That's the name, anti-fascist. It's not for anything. It's against fascism. And that's all it is. It's against something. Well, anytime that you build a system that is against things, and yet it isn't for anything, then it can't really survive on its own. It doesn't have enough structure for it to survive itself. It's more like a disease rather than an actual organism. An organism can live within an ecosystem, and it can sustain it regardless of how many resources there are. It will find a way to find equilibrium with its environment, even if that means dying, even if that means just not reproducing anymore. It will do that. A disease will not do that. A disease will just proliferate irregardless of its environment, and it pays no heed to anything except reproduce. It doesn't care if it kills its own host. It doesn't care if it's capable of surviving. It only cares about incessant reproduction. Its singular focus is to go parasitically feed off of other cells and infest them with its coating. And that's all it does. And if it weren't for that parasitic cell host that's hosting it, it would not be able to survive. It's not an organism. It cannot live on its own. It can't survive itself, let alone anything else. It's born to die. It is not a person. It is a disease. And so, Antifa, anti-fascist, anti-anything is a disease until or unless it can cure itself and become a full organism that actually has some structure, that's actually able to reproduce on its own, where it has some ideological merit, is if it develops an axiom that has positive value. For example, it's very simple for you to make the jump between against fascism and then for freedom. It's very easy to make that jump because the way that you justify the one is through the other. By saying that you're against fascism, it's because you're for freedom. And the reason that you're for freedom is because you're against fascism. And they both feed into each other, they support each other, they affirm each other, and that's what sustains the system. That's all it would need. That's all it would take is for Antifa to hear the gospel of freedom. Okay? You know, if you say you're against fascism, then you must be for freedom, I would think. Because why is fascism evil? And if you say, well, it's just clear, it's just apparent, well, it isn't to them. Do you really think that the fascists are doing this because they think that it's evil to do? Do you think that they're doing it and they know that it's wrong? Or do you think that they're doing it because they've somehow justified it to themselves to say that it's valuable to themselves to do this? If it were truly evil, it wouldn't benefit them either. To say that they benefit from gaining power, for example, is ludicrous, because if they gain power by disregarding human rights, if that's the argument, that the bourgeoisie, or whatever it is, the fascists, say that the reason that they're doing what they do is so that they can gain more power. Okay, and then they gain more power, and they gain more power, and they gain more power. That's an unsustainable system, because eventually there's nothing there to gain more power over. You will eventually run into a limit. Either you've already conquered everybody, or there's people that are unconquerable that you just cannot conquer, regardless of what methods you use. So, if you get really deep into the idea of what it is to be against fascism, then you have to examine why you would be against fascism. Well, because it's evil. How do you know it's evil? Well, you're a fascist. That's how I know you're a fascist. You have to actually examine it. So, like, and that's what I'm saying is, like, that's why it's a disease right there, is because that's what the response would be. Well, that's how I know you're a fascist, because you'd even ask the question. No, the reason that somebody becomes a fascist is because they stop asking questions, not because they ask the wrong question. Nobody ever became a fascist because they asked the wrong question. It's because they didn't ask the question. It's because they just promoted violence. They just do whatever they want to do at someone else's cost. Now, the reason that that's evil is because it takes away the person's choices, in my opinion. You could also say that it takes away their independence, but it takes away something that's valuable. Okay, well, if that's valuable, then you must have a value. You value that, you're for that, whatever that is. And that's how quick and easy it could be for Antifa to be converted. It just needs that last little bit of information, and then it can become an actual thing. And it's like, you know, there's so much potential because they are clearly bored. They want to do something. They just don't know what to do, and so then they're just out in the streets and promoting violence and being fags instead of actually fucking helping because they don't know what to help. They don't know what to do to help. So they're just throwing their fucking hands in the air like they just don't care, or they're flapping their arms and autistically screeching, or they're throwing their shit at somebody else, or they're tackling somebody, or pepper spraying, silencing them, breaking their camera, punching them, restraining them, whatever they're doing that's violent could be replaced by something that's constructive, which again, like I had argued, is rational. It helps the group, it helps the individual, it helps society to stop throwing rocks. Like Jesus said, he who has never sinned, cast the first stone. No one should cast the first stone. And if anyone ever did, then the only one who ever could would be Jesus or God. And they chose not to do this. And so I think that's a direction that we should all head, is to just not do that. If you're against fascism, then you must be for human rights. If you're for human rights and you're for freedom and the ability for the individual to make their own choices, then you must be for freedom of speech so that those people can assemble freely, so that they can communicate freely, so that they can exchange ideas freely, so they can become an organized system freely. Now, maybe the reason that somebody would disagree with that statement or proposition is that, well, that gives people the freedom to spread lies, not necessarily the truth. So if we take away all communication, then at the very least we can ensure that there is no lies. There's no hate speech. There's no way to offend someone if you're being silent, or if you aren't even there to offend, which is, I think, their goal. Let's say that succeeded and you've killed the Nazis and there are no more Nazis to kill. What do you do then? What is there to do after that? Do you disband and the party's over and that's it and that's all that there ever was? I mean, and I think that's valid. You can stop there. You can be like, well, that's it. That's the only goal or intent that I have, is to just destroy this thing, and then whatever replaces it will be better than that anyway. I don't really care. Haven't given it much thought. I just want this thing gone because I can't tolerate it. And I think that that's ultimately why Antifa will never be converted. The people that are in it are they're just individually going to come to their own conclusions. Some of them will eventually stop being part of Antifa because they'll realize that there's nothing to be a part of. There is no community in Antifa. In the moment that there ever is, it's not Antifa. It's something. It's not anti-something anymore. So, it's the most bizarre thing to only be against things and not for them. And it's like, does that constitute a thing? Well, clearly it does, because we are seeing this idea manifest. It has a name, it can be referenced, it has a very specific behavioral pattern. It apparently is capable of organizing large masses of individuals. And so, yeah, it's clearly a thing. But why is it a thing? Because anti-things are things. Or at least anti-things exist. So, if we give value to anti-things, and we say that they have some value, we start off with that first idea, that there are some anti-things that are better than others. I'd rather be not in pain. I'd rather not suffer. Whether that means to rest or to play, I'd rather just not be enslaved. But the freedom to either rest or play, or both, hopefully, but at different times, in different places, I would think that'd be a good thing. So, if you don't want the SAMs to intervene, then all you have to do is just not destroy anything. And I think that was the basic point. You can create all of these different systems, but if you create systems that are only bent on destruction, they are of nothing. And so they will eventually just disband once their goal is either achieved, or even if it's not achieved, it never will fully crystallize into a thing. It's just a disease. And so I have to then say that Antifa, as a disease, isn't actually worth defending, because there isn't anything there to defend. It's just a weapon. It's like a gun. It's not evil and it's not good, but is it really necessary, or is this something that could be avoided? Like, I could see Antifa being necessary if there were an actual fascist that was in charge. Then, yeah. Like, if there was actually a government that was hell-bent on owning its population so that its population had no more choices to make. Would a violent overthrow be necessary? I would hope not. I don't think that violence is ever necessary most of the time. But sometimes maybe it is. I don't know. I am wishy-washy on that. I would like to believe that it's never necessary, that there's always a way to defend oneself without using violence. Because if it's true that existence is good, then creation is good, and destruction is therefore evil. And so then we can't destroy things, regardless of whether they're destructive themselves or not. And then that leads us to Jesus, where we have to then sacrifice our own existence in order for things that sacrifice others' existences exist. And I think that that's kind of a strange idea. It's very difficult for me to grapple with, to live with. The idea that I may have to accept simply not existing anymore as a martyr to the idea that all systems have value and that all systems are worth defending. And if there is anything to defend, then the defense of it makes it sustainable, it makes it independent, it makes it integrated and consistent, logically valid, where the parts cooperate. And it has a structure. And it's logical and rational, and it has a deductively rational conclusion, and I would hope empirically sound premises. Given empirically sound premises and a logical linkage which doesn't use a logical fallacy, then the result should be true. And given that the only way that we can be free is if we trust each other and are able to trust each other, then the conclusion is that we need to build a place where we can trust each other, where there's like a value for every system, but those systems are kept unto themselves. And that instead of killing each other, we just separate into our own communities that we specifically have. And for some reason, this has been twisted in our own time, where it's like, in order to say that we should all belong to our own communities, we have to somehow imply racism or sexism. And it's like, no. Because we're not saying that for everyone. We're not saying to impose that upon anyone. We're saying that we allow homogeneity to occur, where not every single grouping of individual peoples is a random mishmash of the same random mixture of, all these various disparate groups. It should have some new, novel flavor or genre or style or culture. And all those cultures are unique and should be kept conserved, including white culture, including straight white male culture, if there is one. Then it will also be defended and should and must be defended. It can't be any less valuable than a gay, black, female community would be. They would be equally valuable, because how are you going to say that one of them is better than the other? So then they have to be equally valuable. And so then if you have a system in which all those communities are equally valuable, then they must be separate. They must be themselves. They must have their own homogeneity to them. So it isn't to say that we should allow each of these communities to be destroyed and replaced by one mega community where everybody is exactly the same all the time. It's that we have our own individual unique cultures. And that because we have our own individual unique cultures, and because those cultures are unique unto us only, then it's necessarily going to exclude the other cultures from it so that it can remain itself. And to give you an idea of the reverse of what that is Tex-Mex. If you've ever eaten Tex-Mex food, you know what I'm saying. It's not Mexican food. It's Americanized Mexican food. It's Texan Mexican food. It's not Mexican, it's Texan food, but it's, in the style of. It's kind of like if you were going to sing a song, if you were going to cover a song, but not be the band that made it originally. And then you can do it in the style of the band. Or not. And so those cultures should be separate. They should be allowed to be separate. They should be allowed to be their own communities. And it isn't a case that there are any communities that shouldn't exist. All communities should exist. And that's the radical statement. All communities should exist. The thing is that what you'll find is that in these groups that exist where they don't have an ability to sustain themselves, that they won't. And so then they won't exist eventually. Or they'll be always the minority. Always the tiny, tiny minority. Although existent, not eradicated, like everybody always wants to eradicate. But think about it. Wouldn't you prefer knowing where the enemy is and concentrating it into an area and being able to predict where it's going to be and adjust accordingly? Where it's small and manageable, and you know where it is, versus you have no idea where it is. It could pop up at any time. It has an unknown number of people that are doing unknown things at unknown times in unknown places, all of which have to be investigated simultaneously. And there's always the room for corruption in between, all these people and what they're doing, and with each other, and the possibility of collusion, and the possibility of conversion, etc. All of this making it so complex that there's no room for regulation, thus making the street the regulator. And the street is the most horrible place to regulate things. You don't want anything regulated in the street. You want things regulated in Congress. So yeah, there's all these people that will think, well, if you legalize everything, then nothing will be illegal, and so everybody could just do whatever they want. Yeah, they can. They can do whatever they want in these particular places. So there will be, signs, there will be waivers that you have to sign over your rights and know what you're doing before you go across this boundary. You may, once crossing it, experience things that you may not want to experience, such as, and they'll be said in there so that you can't be shocked. You're going to be warned. And then if you go into these places and you do these things in these places, while it might be legal to do it, it doesn't make it good. It doesn't make it morally permissible. So that's what it would be in the future, is that because the street sucks at regulating things, and because the crime is way more manageable when it's allowed to be regulated, everything will just simply be regulated, and it won't be eradicated. The devil will be allowed to exist. There will be an allowance given to those people and places that wish to engage in activities that the rest of us might find abhorrent. And that way, we don't ever kill off Jesus. We don't ever kill off whoever it is that might be the Savior. We don't know who that could be. But if we target anyone, it could be Jesus. And if we kill Jesus, again, what will happen? We won't be able to sustain ourselves. We will be thrust into darkness for forever. So, it never says that in the Bible that will ever happen. But that might be because things just cease to happen, that there won't be anything that happens, that God will shut the book. And then that'll be it. So I think that it would be of great interest to us to not do that and to have everybody have their own spaces, and that we just determine for ourselves where we end up. Now, that's going to be extremely tempting for some people, but like I say, I believe in the freedom of choice, and I believe in the freedom of speech, and I believe that people should have freedom of information and freedom of assembly. And so as long as they assemble freely, then that's fine. But they can't kidnap people. There would have to be places where, there are signs and things, but you can't just run around doing literally whatever you want.